Welcome to Aging Insights. I'm Grace Egan, Executive Director of the New Jersey Foundation for Aging. The New Jersey Foundation for Aging is happy to produce Aging Insights as an information resource for caregivers, seniors, and boomers. In the past, we've talked about the Elder Economic Index, and the reason why we're talking about this today is when we did the study, as other states did, we could see that the most expensive cost for seniors was really their housing expense. The Elder Economic Index looks at the cost that seniors have for their housing, for their food, for their transportation, for their health care, and miscellaneous. A single senior in New Jersey renting a one-bedroom apartment would need more than $27,000 to cover their expenses. And if someone is a couple with the same expenses, it would be $38,000. So it really is a very big cost, and so today I'm very pleased that we could really kind of look at the housing issues that we're dealing with in New Jersey, and perhaps looking at some solutions for seniors so they can close the gap between their income stream and their basic expenses. We really wanted to bring local experts, which I think we have, and we have national experts as well. So today's guests include Linda Couch, who is the Senior Vice President for Policy and Research at the National Low-Income Housing Coalition in Washington, D.C. And it is solely dedicated to achieve socially just public policy that assures people with the lowest incomes in the states that they have affordable and decent homes. We're also joined by Arnold Cohen, who is the policy coordinator of the Housing Community Development Network of New Jersey, and Curtis Johnson, who works with the Diocesan Housing Services of Camden Diocese, and he is the executive director of their housing services. So I really would like to get started, and I really appreciate you all being here. Linda, I think you really represent some of the core issues that are coming down from the federal government, as well as what really trickles down to the states. So can you explain a little bit how the coalition got started and really what your emphasis and priorities are?
Sure. We were started in 1974 by a woman named Cushing Dolbear, who believed that, armed with the right data, that she could prove through the Low Income Housing Coalition to Congress that the country did indeed have a severe affordable housing shortage, and that shortage was really clumped and primarily made up of people at the lowest income levels. And so since 1974, the coalition has been working to improve programs that address the housing needs of the lowest income, to make them bigger, but then also create new programs that will end homelessness in the United States and address everyone's housing needs.
Do you see this as a national crisis?
It's absolutely a national crisis. Coming to New Jersey, I've studied a lot of New Jersey's data, and the housing crisis is real and severe in New Jersey, but there is no doubt that what's happening in New Jersey is happening in every state across the country.
When you look at our data, what would you say we really would need to do to address the issue in terms of units that we need?
Well, the housing problem can be addressed really in two ways. One, we can increase people's incomes so they can afford the housing that's out there, or we can address the housing side of it. And on the housing side of it, which is the side of it that we primarily work on, it is about the preservation of every single affordable unit we have, we need to keep. But we also need to produce a lot of units. In New Jersey, you have a shortage of almost 190,000 affordable and available units for the lowest income renters who desperately need them. And you know, those units can be achieved by a mix of new production, renovation of existing unaffordable units into affordable units, but also new rental assistance vouchers.
And you mentioned vouchers, so there are several different ways that the federal government is trying to address the issue.
That's right, and every community is a little bit different. Some might have stock, where if you had a voucher, you could use that voucher to rent out that apartment. And other communities might not have any real inventory of apartments that are even available to rent with a voucher.
Well, you know, it's interesting because, as I mentioned, we did the Elder Economic Study, and it's been done in other states. And it was amazing to me that every state recognized affordable housing as the issue, and yet it wasn't something that was being addressed. And so I contacted our colleagues. Well, how do you do this? You know, what kind of policy do you have? And I was told about weatherization programs and a variety of issues, but they weren't policy driven. So I really would like our viewers to understand the difference between policy and advocacy and local programs. So what do you consider a policy?
Well, I would consider it a policy that the federal government be involved in the affordable housing solutions for the lowest income people.
What's policy, though?
So a policy would be that it is worth federal expenditures to be dedicated to programs like public housing, like vouchers. And I think that, in my mind, that differs from program for how you're actually going to go about carrying out the policy, the intent, the principle that the federal government should be involved in those activities.
And Arnold, I'm really happy that you're here because obviously we have a New Jersey coalition that really looks at this issue. And from what Linda said, I can see that it kind of trickles down. The policy in DC is something that you try to deal with at the statewide level?
Exactly. So there are policies on a federal level that affect people's ability to be able to afford their home. There's policies on a state level, and there's things that a municipality can do. So really on every level of government, you could put policies in place to be able to help people to afford the place that they call home. Now clearly more potential dollars are coming out of the federal government, and there's more that can be done there, but there's something that can be done on every level of government.
So from a statewide view, what would you say are the policy issues that we could deal with in New Jersey?
For example, New Jersey, on the positive side, New Jersey is one of the few states in the nation that actually has a state rental assistance program.
A state?
State rental assistance program. So in other words, there's a program where New Jersey is spending about $42 million of its funds to be able to help people who are low income be able to afford to live in the rental housing that's available in a modest rental property in their community.
And this is for all ages?
This is for all ages, but there is a set aside of 30% of the of those vouchers for seniors.
Now, I just want to say that it's very important for us in terms of senior issues to recognize that we don't want anyone to age into poverty either. So affordable housing at any age is really very important.
Yeah.
So if there's $42 million, let me just interrupt you.
Sure.
Is it sufficient?
No, it's not.
Curtis
It's a
is
drop in the
laughing.
bucket of what's actually needed. And the problem is that program is, we just lost, over the last 2 years, we lost 900 of those vouchers. So
900 vouchers.
Vouchers. So the program was providing vouchers for over 4,000 people, families, and now it is down 900. So it's a program that, as it becomes more expensive, serves less people, and as times are tough, we need to be fighting to make sure we at least maintain what we have.
We often hear about the cost burden for housing. So how does that picture look in New Jersey?
There's cost burden is considered a family that is paying more than 30% of its income towards housing. Extreme cost burden is a family that's paying more than half of its income.
50%.
50% for housing. In New Jersey, you have about 1 million households that are paying over half their income for housing. Getting back to what Linda's saying, this is why we see this as a crisis here in the state.
Can you say of that percentage that are extremely cost burden, how many of those individuals are in the rental assistance program that you mentioned?
Once they're in the rental assistance program, then they're no longer severely cost burden.
Oh, okay.
So that's the advantage of programs like rental assistance, is that it takes somebody who otherwise would be in a housing crisis and have a difficult time managing their dollars. How much do I spend for food? How much do I spend for clothing? How much do I spend for my child's education? And now you actually are able to manage your budget because those housing costs are only taking a certain percent of your income.
In putting together information for this show, I contacted individuals to ask how many current affordable housing units there were in New Jersey. And I know you were talking about the rental assistance program, but I was told there were 70,000 current affordable housing units in New Jersey.
So what we're talking about there is we're talking about the amount of homes that have what's called a deed restriction. So in other words, there's a deed on them that says that for X amount of years, this home will remain affordable. Now there's other market rate housing out there. Now I might be lucky and be able to find a rental apartment somewhere that is only $500-700 a month. There's not many of them out there, but if I'm lucky, that's the market. Now it might be affordable today for me, but tomorrow that landlord can jack up my rent. And so because there's not a restriction on its affordability, there's no guarantee that it's going to be affordable next year. And so that's the difference between a lot of towns will say, well, look at our housing stock. Our rents aren't that much. Well, that might be true today, but how about tomorrow? And that's the importance of having that deed restriction there, because that guarantees for that family or for that senior that over the foreseeable future, what they pay for housing will not increase as a percentage of their income.
Well, I'd like to come back to what a deed restriction might mean, but I think I really would like Curtis to really talk about your work in the 6 southern counties and whether it's new or whether it's vouchers or connecting people with different programs. So, and then, I'd really kind of like to go back a little bit.
Well, the Diocesan Housing Services Corporation of the Diocese of Camden is the affordable housing arm of the Diocese of Camden. And you are correct, we do serve the lower 6 counties, and we currently have 7 properties now. 6 of them are for seniors, and 1, a family housing property, is located in Burlington County. What we found is we have a mix of properties. Most of them are senior properties, and most of them, 5 of the 6, are for very low income seniors, and we have 1, the first project done by the Camden Diocese in 1973, Victorian Towers, which is a moderate income senior facility. So that's the one that,
These are not mixed.
Just that one is mixed.
Okay.
But the other ones are very low income, where a resident would pay 30% of their income towards the rent. And on average, we're talking about a resident having to pay a monthly cost burden of about $250 towards a $700 a month rent. So you can see the savings that are involved in that.
How do people find out about if there are openings in your situation?
We market, and that's one thing we're working on, to market even more, but we do an aggressive marketing campaign. We just opened up our newest property in Pleasantville, the village of St. Peters, and
In Atlantic County?
In Atlantic County. It opened up in February, and we had 73 units there, 74 units, one for the on-site manager, and 73 one-bedroom units. And we already have a wait list that's probably approaching 40 or 50 possible applicants, so you can see the value of that housing. Arnold makes a great point when he speaks about the vouchers and why they're important, and the lack thereof is I have openings in our moderate income facility, and if a low income resident had a voucher, they could move in and afford the rent there. So although the rent of about $500 for a studio apartment is great in Cape May City, it's not great if you have an income of Social Security that's about $8,500 a year. So
which is true.
That's right.
When we were doing our study on elder economics, we realized that the average Social Security for a woman in New Jersey is $12,741. But there are people that only get $700 a month. And so there's a full range. And even at $12,741, and we looked at the gap, as I mentioned earlier in the show, of $27,000 for their basic expenses. So it's an incredible gap that's only widening. And so we wanted to be sure that we would tell people how to access affordable housing in New Jersey, how to advocate for affordable housing in New Jersey, what policy changes we really wanted to address, because it's a very big issue and probably the highest expense that seniors have. If one's a senior couple, you have a higher expense for your health care because there's no family policy at Medicare. So you're both doing out of pocket for your Medigap, but housing otherwise is just an incredibly high cost. So you've been very successful, Curtis, though, in getting suburban housing programs up. And I know that's something that we probably need more of in New Jersey. I'm always surprised when someone says to me that maybe somebody doesn't need that 4-bedroom home that they raise their children in. And I say, well, what affordable housing do you have in the town for them? Because if we could have other affordable housing units of a different size, they could downsize and a new family could move into that situation. How do we promote that when, as Arnold said, it's a state issue, it's a federal issue, it's a state issue, and it's a municipal issue? How do we advocate for these changes at the municipal level? Arnold?
So,
Curtis has done it, so how do we do it across the state?
what you need to be doing is, and I think on the web, on your screen will be contact numbers for all the organizations, is really be in touch with our organizations that are doing that advocacy on a state and a federal level that can inform you of the opportunities that we have at that specific time for those policy changes. And it really differs at different times. But so, for example, the state of New Jersey goes through its budget that needs to be passed by the end of June. And within that budget, they can be allocating more or less dollars towards housing choices in our state. Same thing's true with the federal government. And again, there's a different budget cycle for the federal government. And so what advocacy is needed at each particular point in time is going to be different. But clearly, all the time, there's something that we need to be advocating for those changes. And then with your own municipality is really supporting the application of housing, affordable housing, that's coming before your town council. As Curtis can attest to, there's a public hearing when a developer wants to bring a senior housing development into your community. And your planning board, your city council is going to approve or disapprove of that. Oftentimes you have what's called a not in my backyard syndrome. People who just don't want to see any kind of new housing come in and will object to even senior housing. And they need to hear your voice to know that there are people who want to see that housing in their community, that welcome the fact that we have a diversity of incomes in our community, and that people should be able to live in their community as they are aging, that we should be able to take care, that our children who grow up in our communities should be able to have a place they can afford to live, that the people that work and take care of us should be able to afford to live in our communities.
Yes, frequently that's called workforce housing, but I also heard the phrase lately, low wealth, which I guess is sort of another way of not necessarily workforce, but another way of addressing low-income housing. I think I'm always surprised at the pushback for housing opportunities and development when, in fact, where are we going to live when we really want to give up our individual homes and not necessarily do lawn care if we've had that responsibility, or just other housing maintenance issues. So, I do think that it's that we need to find these options.
Well, and again, it's not only for the senior population, But if you know, as you age, you need that caretaker, you need that health care, those workers are only going to be able to travel a certain distance. And if they can't live close to where you live, it's going to be more difficult to find that kind of care that you need to be able to maintain your independence.
And I think that the use of language like low wealth or workforce housing are sort of cover-ups for what people are trying to say. And there is a notion in using the term workforce housing that low-income people aren't really working, and we want to serve instead the people who are working. And so I think we have to be really careful and understand the mismatch between what people are earning when they work and what rents are, because rents are way out of line with where incomes are, especially at the lowest levels. And I think it also allows us, when we talk about low wealth, we assume that there's some wealth there, when in so many families there really isn't any wealth. There is some income, and but what we're talking about primarily are extremely poor households. And no matter what you call it, you can't get around the fact that every community has extremely low-income households that need affordable housing. And as Arnold was saying, there are tremendous downfalls to communities that don't have the range of housing to meet their range of needs. And I think that this is, what we're all about, is not to make sure that there's only rental housing for low-income people in a community, but to help fill in that spectrum where the market hasn't quite gotten there. That's right. And certainly the advocacy at the federal level is to make the point that federal dollars and federal programs are critical here, because the private sector cannot step in and fill this void. There's no profit here for the private sector. If there was, they would have eaten up this market a long time ago.
That's right.
But this area of affordable housing for the lowest income is really ripe for public investment, and we should be demanding it to take care of our seniors, our people with disabilities, and other people who've contributed so much to society.
And the other thing, just to add to that, is your listeners need to be aware that different housing programs have different eligibility. And so there's housing programs, and Curtis can speak directly to this, and he did, is that are there and are affordable to people that as a family are making $25,000 a year.
That's right.
There's other programs that at $25,000 a year, you do not qualify. You are
right.
too poor for affordable housing.
That's right.
And so that's something, and so often the term workforce housing has been used to mean people that are between 80 and 120% of median income, or people making $80,000 a year. So one needs to be very careful about these terms.
And we started off kind of talking about policy issues, and one of the things as I listen to the conversation is I look at our units, I look at our production and what we're trying to do, and if there's ever a time to really get deep into some policy, is that when I think about the average age of our residents when they move in their mid-70s, well, the boomers are on our heels.
Right.
And if we wait until they're eligible, we'll really have a problem. I mean, today I may have an issue at my moderate income building because people choose not to live in a studio apartment right now. And very soon, it's not going to be a choice. It's going to be, thank God I have something. And the wait lists are going to continue to grow because that is going to be in demand, whether it's an income challenge issue or I want to stay in my town where I raised my family, or just not being able, as you say, to maintain your home. I mean, it's a huge responsibility, notwithstanding the tax burden on homeowners. So in New Jersey, we need, and nationwide, we need to pay attention to the policy implications of just this expanded population.
Well, I think we've really covered a lot of territory. I'm not sure I have time to go back to what deed restricted means, Arnold. You got like a little bite?
The bite is, it means that where your home needs to stay affordable to you for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever that deed restriction is. It means that during that period, your rent cannot exceed a certain portion of your income.
So who does that? Who does the deed restriction?
The deed, again, it depends upon
Is it
who is the
municipal?
funder. It's the funder
okay.
for that program that's providing the home.
All right. Well, as I've said, we really have covered a lot of ground. The other thing I think is as Curtis mentioned, we do have waiting lists, and I think it's always very confusing when we get calls in the office from seniors and their family members. How do I find out about affordable housing in my area? We always refer them to the county offices on aging because there are 21 county offices, and they will recognize and hopefully identify the senior housing programs and the affordable housing programs in their area. I know we also have the New Jersey Housing Resource website, which we will put on the screen as well.
And also, you should put on the screen, the HUD website has a list of subsidized senior housing here in New Jersey, where somebody can just put in their town, their zip code, or their county, and will come up a list of everything within that area.
And if you will, on that, include the phone number to Victorian Towers, and if anyone wants resort living at its best for its best price, come on down.
Cape May City, here we come.
And I'll also,
I want to wrap up and
Okay.
go ahead.
I just would also say that traditional subsidized housing programs like public housing, like Section 8, do often predominantly serve seniors. And we don't think of them as senior housing programs, but in many, many communities, they certainly are.
That's right.
And you can access, again, through HUD.gov,
That's right.
all your local housing authorities who each maintain their own waiting lists.
Okay, well, I really do appreciate you being here today. Appreciate you taking the time and sharing so much information with our viewers. I want to remind our viewers that if you want to find out any services in your area, to contact your county office on aging, and you can reach them by dialing 1-877-222-3737. And you'll see a variety of resources in the closing frames of our program today in terms of housing and some of the websites that our guests have mentioned. And if you want to find out more information about the New Jersey Foundation for Aging and how to support our work, you can go to our website, www.njfoundationforaging.org. And until we see you next time, we encourage you to stay in touch and to remember that aging is everyone's business.